Hello, everyone. Welcome to okclarity.com, the live experience that will bring you clarity on young adult friendship. So tonight's live stream will be about 20 minutes long, including a Q&A at the end, so stay tuned for around the 15-minute mark when I'll review and answer some of the Q&As that come in on okclarity.com. If you have any questions, you could drop them in the chat at any time, but I'm not going to address them till the end. And if you're joining us tonight from other social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, welcome. Again, I'm only going to be taking questions from the okclarity.com live stream, so please feel free to head over there if you want to ask any questions. A quick and important disclaimer, everything discussed tonight is, of course, for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of it's a substitute for professional mental health, wellness, medical, or financial advice. Okay, so my name is Rikki Ash. I'm a life coach. I specialize in using Viktor Frankl's meaning-centered approach in my coaching, and I'm excited tonight to apply those ideas to a very highly requested topic of making friends as a young adult. And tonight's talk is brought to you by the walking movement. I'm not sure what that is yet, but it's coming soon and it sounds very cool. So stay tuned to stay in the loop. Okay, so what's the problem we're here to discuss? So making friends, the reason I think it was such a popular question, people have such, how do I do this? Is because there's really not a set place to meet people like you had in school, right? Most of our friends when we were younger, it's because we go to school every day, we see them in school, we study for a test together, and so we build rapport that way. But when you're older, obviously, people relocate to different neighborhoods. It's a time of transition. So everybody's kind of in a different stage of life at a different time. Some people get married sooner, whatever, this job, that job. They're in different just eras. People are moving. And then there's issues of, confidence and social anxiety and finding like-minded people. And it's really hard when you don't have meaningful connections. It can make you feel inadequate. It can lead to things like low self-esteem, more anxiety, and of course, obviously, mental health always affects physical health. So how prevalent is this struggle? Honestly, I hear it all the time from people that it's really hard to make good friends as a young adult. But studies confirm it also. There was a study done where 30% of young adults said they reported feeling lonely. And I think especially COVID exacerbated this problem because people might have otherwise been forced to socialize right now, right? For people with social anxiety, COVID may have seemed, oh, it's amazing, but it actually wasn't so great because it sort of fed into their social anxiety. And so they didn't have to get over it, so to speak, right? Now, why is this topic so important and so worth talking about is because honestly, making friends as a young adult and into adulthood is crucial because it addresses this fundamental human need, right, for social connection, for belonging. And there's so much research that shows us that the positive impact on having meaningful friendships, it affects mental health, it affects our overall well-being, and learning effective strategies for how to make friends when you're a young adult. It's so important and so helpful to alleviate feelings of loneliness. It strengthens social support networks, right? And of course, like we said, if it affects your mental health positively, it'll affect your physical health positively. And honestly, the reason this topic is so important to me is friends are really what carry you through, right? Adulthood is definitely challenging and it comes with new territory. And the best way to get through it is with good friends. And so I think everyone needs that. And I would love to talk to you guys a little bit about how to go about making friends as a young adult. And I can't promise you I'm going to answer, everything you've ever thought about in terms of how to make friends as a young adult, but I want to offer a few solutions. So the way I said at the beginning, I'm very much a fan of Viktor Frankl. For those of you who don't know, he was a Holocaust survivor and he came up with his own modality, so to speak, of therapy called logotherapy, which in other words is therapy through meaning. So he had a meaning-centered approach because he believed that the main drive of a human being was the will to meaning. And so I like to use that in any solutions or strategies that I share. And so he actually shares three main strategies for meaning. And so the first way that you find meaning in life is through what you put out in the world. And so I want to share with you this idea, right, about making friends as a young adult has a lot to do with what you put out there, with the energy you put out. So, what do I mean by that? So, first of all, you have to be willing to initiate meaningful conversation. That involves being a little bit vulnerable, right? Most of us can have a conversation about the weather. Thank God for the weather sometimes, because there are people that there's not much else to talk about. However, if we want something to move to the next level, we do need to have a certain level of vulnerability, right? And again, it's all about a balance, because yes, we want to put out that vulnerable energy, not too much self-disclosure like when you first meet someone, because then they feel a little bit, oh, why is this person telling me this? And then the next day you feel, right, what I think Brene Brown termed as the vulnerability hangover, right? You feel like, did I really share that with someone I hardly knew? However, as much as you don't want to share everything and anything, you definitely want to make sure that you are initiating meaningful, authentic conversation, that you are going a little bit out of your comfort zone to talk about things beyond, weather and small talk, as we call it, right? Another thing, another idea in terms of the energy you're putting out there is you want to be authentic and you want to be humble. The last thing most people want is arrogant friends, right? We all have met those people that can't stop talking about themselves. Maybe if you got on a date with one of those types of people, right? It's not pleasant. It's not enjoyable. It's just like, what is this? Why are you talking about yourself all day? Do you not care that there's another person here? And so we need to put the energy out there that we would want for us, ourselves, right? We need to put that good friend energy. And part of that is humility, right? Don't talk about yourself the whole time and actually be a good friend. How do you be a good friend? So we know empathy is huge, right? And I think there's really two types of empathy. So there's empathy for when people are going through difficult times and difficult challenges. And I think as hard as that is, it's something that we've made progress on. I feel like I've seen a lot of different, Instagram accounts, people talking about difficult things that they go through and how other people are starting to understand them, whether it's a tragedy or a personal someone's going through a divorce or a fertility issue, or they just want someone to understand where they are in life, in a relationship, whatever it is. And so there's the empathy in kind of meeting someone where they're at. And I think even more difficult than that, I've taken some informal surveys, which one's harder, being happy for people when they're going through something challenging, or being happy for people, not being happy, empathizing with people when they're going through something challenging, or actually being happy for them when they're going through something great. And I think the mark of a really good friend is someone that can be excited and happy for your successes. I know my closest friends, right? When I have a success or something good that happens and I share it with them and they're just like all caps, OMG, even more excited than I am, that's really a true friend. And right here, what I'm telling you is not what to look for in a friend. But again, my number one solution is the energy you put out, right? Be vulnerable, authentic, be a good friend, be the friend you want others to be to you, okay? So that's number one, the energy you put out there. Number two, we're going to talk about is experiential values. So Viktor Frankl talks about you can always find meaning in experiences. And so this is one of the ideas here, right? Is have experiences with people. So I think a lot of people push back on this because they're like, there's nowhere to meet people. There really is plenty of places to meet people. It's just a matter of you're too tired, you don't want to, it's too overwhelming. But even, if there's a talk in your community, a shiur, a Torah talk, maybe a volunteer opportunity, and look for experiences that align with your values, because that's where you'll find other people with similar values, right? So if you enjoy listening to, Torah talks, let's say, go to a shiur and hopefully you'll meet other people that also enjoy that. If you enjoy volunteering, so go volunteer somewhere and you'll meet other people that enjoy that also. And already that a shared experience is so impactful, right? If you think about how easy it was for a lot of people to make friends when they were teenagers, it's because they had the shared experience of school, right? Some of my closest friends in school, it's because we were in the same class and we had to study for a test together. So I think it's important to have shared experiences. and make those experiences happen, right? Even if you're exhausted, which I know happens at the end of the day, and a lot of times it's at the end of the day, but it's something worth prioritizing if, making friends is important. And I can't overemphasize this enough. Be present during the experience. So many of us use our phone as a crutch, right? Oh, we get a little nervous and we start texting, and we're not even texting and we're just going blah, 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 because we're nervous that someone is going to see that we're not talking to anyone. And yeah, that's like social suicide in a sense, I guess, right? And we don't want to have that. But we have to be willing, again, to go back to that first thing of being vulnerable. No one's going to want to come up to us if they think that we are off limits, if we're not interested, if we're too busy for them. And by the way, the worst thing and the biggest turnoff in the friendship world, I would say, is when you're trying to talk to someone and they're just texting the whole time and you're like, okay, you have someone better to talk to, like, I'm not even going to waste my time, right? I think that's so important is experiential values, right? Is have experiences, enjoyable experiences where you can meet people. But yeah, it takes effort and energy to get out of bed or to not get into bed, more like, and to really not use your phone as a crutch and actually focus on the experience. And again, also don't put so much pressure on the experience. Like if it's not, if you don't meet people, then okay, but it's quality over quantity, right? Not most people, they say they have 50 friends. They're not all the same tier, the same level. You don't need 50 friends. I don't know that you could have 50 friends. You don't need, right? You only need a few friends, and that's what's going to make the difference. Now, the third thing I want to share is actually a strategy that Viktor Frankl uses very often. Well, he has used very often in his work, and that's something called paradoxical intention. So I've used it before on previous lives here. The idea is really not to focus too much on the process, not to focus so much on the fact that you need to make the friends, because the more you focus on the result, the less the result happens in a way, right? And so instead of focusing on, I have to make a friend at this event, right? Focus instead on the process. Don't take yourself too seriously, right? Make sure you use humor and playfulness appropriately. People enjoy humor, right? There's a reason that it's so important. And as funny as it sounds, that humor is actually a pretty amazing strategy. Viktor Frankl, I know I talk about him a lot, but he's pretty cool. You should definitely read his books. He actually writes a very interesting thing about humor, and he says that humor actually is what allows us to kind of get above our circumstances for a moment and like kind of breathe, right? He used it so much during the time of the Holocaust because he felt, right, that he obviously it was horror around him, but if he could make a little joke and get them above that that tragedy for just a moment, it was so worth it. It gets you out of where you are, where you're stuck. And so humor and playfulness to a certain extent, not taking yourself too seriously, is so important because it allows you to focus on the process, not the result. And again, like I said, you don't need every single person you make a connection with to become your best friends, right? And if you're not getting like a vibe from someone that they want to be your friends, then okay, move to the next, I think it's important to realize that, like I said before, people think they need to have 50 friends. And the reason they think that is probably because they assume other people have that many friends, right? They assume when they see someone in shul and everyone's surrounding them, there are just people that are more extroverted and attract more people around them. That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, they can call 50 different people at 3:00 in the morning. It likely doesn't. And I think you just need those, like, I don't know, I don't want to give a number, but those few 3:00 in the morning friends, right? And that's really all you need. And so I think these are the three solutions. There's way more out there. This is just like a little taste of what you can do by focusing on the energy you're putting out, right? Again, initiating meaningful conversations, being vulnerable, authentic, and being a good friend. And then we have the experiential values, right? Having experiences, going to things when you're tired, volunteering, finding people with similar interests, and again, not using your phone as a crutch, which is really difficult. I know, but try it. And then again, using humor and playfulness appropriately, not taking yourself too seriously, focusing on the process. Again, you don't need every single person you make a connection with to become your friends. Okay, so now in terms of um, is this really doable? I really understand that this is hard to implement. And a lot of people will say, like, I'm just not that type, right? Like people are just not attracted to being my friends. And the truth is, you know, first of all, a lot of people also say I don't have time. You have time with you have time for what you make time for, right? We all have the same time in a day. You might not have energy, but that's a different thing than time, right? And so if it's important enough to you, then you have to make the time and you have to create the energy to actually go out there and seek out relationships. Further though, right? People that say I've had a lot of people say to me, I'm just like, I don't know what it is about me. No one wants to be my friend. Then I think it's worth actually taking a look and being introspective and kind of figuring out, like, would you want to be your own friend? I know that's like a, hard thing to hear. But there are times when I'm like, oh, I wouldn't want to be my own friend today. And I think it's important to be introspective as to who we are, and that's kind of what we're attracting, right? We want to make sure that we're not just that we're a good friends, but there isn't something like if we're always down, or people enjoy being around friends that smile, that uplift them. And so if we're always negative and we're always down and we're always sad and we're always whatever, then these strategies might not work. We have to be introspective, and make sure we would want to be our own friends, right? Um, and again, one other important thing that I really want to emphasize, it's important to know that friends change over time, right? And you can have 3 really close friends at one point in your life, and that can shift to 3 other really close friends at a different point in your life. And there are times when a friend supports you through one important episode and isn't there the next time. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because everyone goes through different situations in life, and sometimes they need their space, they need their time, and of course it's hard. But it's important not to put this insane pressure of, why don't I have these friends from like 10 years ago, or 30-year-old friends? A lot of people say, oh, my oldest friends from 30 years ago. It's okay if you don't have that. You don't need to have a friend. It's not the years, right? It's the quality of those years. So I think really that kind of concludes my basic talk for the night in terms of what young adult friendship how it can be achieved. And again, when you achieve it, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's worth it. It's worth the effort and the energy. So I'm going to look now to check on the live. I'm very excited about this new feature to see if there's any questions. I don't see any, but it could be that I am not looking at it correctly. Let's check one more time. Just reloading it. Bear with me. Okay, let me just see here. Yeah, okay. It doesn't look like there are any questions. It could also be this is the first time that we've been here, but it was so great to learn with you tonight. And I hope tonight's conversation provided some clarity on making friends as a young adult, and that you walk away with a few strategies for cultivating connection. Thanks so much, and have a great night.